any other castle. Only Rakrak and Zaol, who have designed these strategies and trained in simulations, would truly understand how to approach this. You see, a regular castle and a hill castle are two completely different challenges. Even if vampires are skilled archers, none of their bows can match the precision or power of Rakrak's Lizardmen archers. On top of that, his archers have the advantage of aiming from a higher elevation to the ground below, and even if the vampires manage to climb and reach the castle walls, the Lizardmen are already prepared to deal with them. Massive rocks are ready to be hurled down, sending any intruders crashing back to where they came from. Next comes the batch of the strongest second and third generation vampires. These elite warriors boast impressive stats, but even they are no match for Rakrak's godly lightning attacks. A single strike of his lightning is enough to decimate the entire group. Rakrak, pipe in hand, casually smokes while literally smoking these bastards off the battlefield. Moments later, the front of the hill castle is littered with the corpses of vampires who had foolishly believed that attacking such a fortified position was a wise decision. The attendant reports the grim news to Lord Shaven that they have lost 600 warriors in this last attack. Shaven, visibly annoyed, does not bother to think it over, and immediately orders preparations for another assault. She declares that she must conquer the castle at all costs. Shaven desperately tries to beg the blood and rotten meat god to lend her strength. Meanwhile, the hill castle continues to rain down arrows, while everyone scrambles to escape. One of the high-tier vampires quickly cuts down a coward trying to flee, and he shouts to the others not to give up, claiming they can still conquer the hill castle. Nebula watches from the sidelines, thinking to himself that these fools are marching straight to their deaths. They've barely managed to reach the bottom of the castle walls, and they're already taking so much damage that it would be too costly to continue. The corpses are piling high, giving them a gradual incline, but if they retreat now, they'll have to start all over again. If Shaven were truly a good commander, she would recognize that a short-term attack like this is impossible. She should retreat, but Nebula is sure that her fanaticism blinding her to reality. For now, Jielwubi is not aiding her in the battle, and Nebula wonders why. He has a hunch that Jielwubi might be watching the battle from afar, but if that's the case, it seems he hasn't yet grasped the full situation down there. Shaven grows more desperate with each passing second. If they continue attacking like this, she'll only keep losing more soldiers. Then, one of her soldiers rushes in with urgent news. He tells her that, from behind, about half a day to a day's distance away, trolls, satyros, and lizardmen warriors have united and are heading toward her army. This revelation leaves Shaven stunned, and for a moment, she even considers retreating. But then she realizes it's too late for that. She has already lost too many soldiers, and if her soldiers are caught in between while retreating, it'll be impossible to block the enemy's advance. It's better to conquer the hill castle as quickly as possible and enter it. Just then, Shaven's nose begins to drip. She's confused, as she hasn't bled since becoming a vampire. Before she can process this, another soldier rushes in with more troubling news, which is that the slaves have revolted. To understand what happened, we turn a little back in time, when all the slaves were sitting quietly, hearing the distant roars of battle. One of them asks what happened to those slaves who were dragged out. Someone responded that the vampires lined them up and told them to run toward Hukrin Hill Castle, but they had no choice but to die. But one of the slaves counters. He adds that the fourth human child who was dragged out is still alive. There were blue butterflies. The blue butterflies were hovering above the castle, and the door opened. The lizardmen opened it, and that human boy entered the castle. No one in the tent can believe it. How could one child enter the castle? Why would the lizardmen let them in? At that moment, one of the slaves stands up, ready to rebel. She declares that the story of the lizardmen fighting the vampires and their god watching over them is true. She's tired of being pathetic, and at this rate, they're all going to die. So, even if the rumors are false, she refuses to die like this. Her words inspire the others, and they agree to follow her in rebellion. As some vampires enter to check on the commotion, the slaves suddenly latch onto them. A brutal clash takes place, with vampires and slaves fighting with each other. In the present, Shaven asks how many slaves are causing the commotion. The attendant replies that it's not just a commotion, but that all the slaves have descended into chaos. She asks if all 1,200 slaves are rebelling. The attendant confirms, explaining that all the soldiers guarding them have been killed, and the revolt is growing rapidly. He adds that they're doing their best, but there aren't enough soldiers to contain the slaves. Annoyed, Shaven snaps, asking how they can fail to contain a bunch of weaponless slaves. The attendant responds that there are far more slaves than soldiers, and the slaves are unusually hostile. Unlike usual, they don't seem to care about dying. They're diving for weapons, taking whatever they can find. All of the slaves are rushing toward the castle, since the castle gates are open. Shaven, on the other hand, has no idea when Rakrak opened the castle doors, or how he could have thought this far ahead. She admits to herself that she's severely underestimated him. Suddenly, her attendant requests a detachment of soldiers to apprehend the situation. But when we take a look at Shivan's face, her nosebleed has worsened significantly. She interprets it as a sign of disapproval from the gods, though she refuses to believe that the god who chose her would ever blame her for this. She dismisses the thought and declares that she needs to seize the castle by tomorrow morning at any cost, and she is ready to focus all soldiers on attacking the hill castle. The attendant, hesitant, asks if she plans to leave the slaves unchecked. Even if they take the hill castle, they'll still need slaves, for both feeding and labor, especially when the enemy closes in around them. The lady glares at him and responds coldly for speaking out of turn. Before he can utter another word, she grabs him by the neck. She sinks her fangs into him and drains every last drop of his blood. Now that she has drunk some fresh blood, her mind feels sharper and more focused. She turns to the soldiers standing nearby and asks if there is any general capable of suppressing the rebellion without additional reinforcements. The soldiers nervously promise to do their best with the stationed troops. She gives them the green light to proceed. She then appoints this goat soldier as her new aide, instructing him to fetch her armor. She declares that she plans to open the castle gates herself. The castle's front gates are littered with countless corpses. Despite this, the vampire lady is showing no sign of stopping. Meanwhile, parts of her camp are engulfed in flames due to the unexpected rebellion sparked by the slaves. Rakrak is in awe to witness this disorder. Commander Quezel, standing beside him, turns to him and asks when their reinforcements are expected to arrive. Rakrak calmly explains that it's far too early for reinforcements. Since the attackers are vampires, he is certain the rebellion is being caused by the slaves. Quezel questions why he believes this, so Rakrak merely smiles and responds that it would be wise to assemble the Cockatoo warriors. But the commander does not think it's a good idea, because the vampires will stop their attack to gather their forces and apprehend the slaves. But Rakrak doesn't think that will happen. Quezel then asks how the vampires are going to conquer the castle gate if they are not going to use their armies. Rakrak turns Quezel's attention to the front, where Shaven herself is advancing in order to take down the castle gate. She calls out to Rakrak, daring him to come out and fight if he isn't afraid. Quezel curiously asks his leader if he's going to fight. Rakrak responds confidently, saying that if he doesn't face her now, she'll use her god's power to break the castle gates. She's so desperate that she's come out herself. Rakrak knows the slaves will soon appear behind the enemy lines, and when that happens, he orders Quezel to deploy the Cockatoo warriors. His plan is to pin the enemies and eliminate them. While Rakrak's strategy is clear to us, let's take a look at what Shaven is thinking. She believes that the moment Rakrak opens the gate to fight her, she will send the big weasels toward it, and then the vampire soldiers will start biting the hell out of everyone with little to no regard. If she can break through the gates and take the high ground, she's confident she can target the hill castle and gain a strategic advantage. But suddenly, a massive silhouette casts a shadow over her face. Shaven looks up. It's Rakrak sitting atop his cockatoo. While she is standing in disbelief, my guy comes crashing down at her. Their weapons clash, and although she manages to save herself, the crushing weight of her opponent has left her in awe. She never had imagined that Rakrak is this powerful. After making some distance between each other, Rakrak comes at her, but once again, she manages to save herself from a direct hit. By now she can barely stand. Just 2 attacks were enough to make her knees buckle, but she hasn't given up and keeps fighting. Meanwhile, Nebula watches the battle happen in front of him, and he finds it funny how she underestimated Rakrak as just some regular cavalry soldier. This absolute gigachad of a man is actually a level 21 hero entity, and Anaxi is a cockatrice most hunters couldn't catch even with a group of 10. The situation is already stacked in Rakrak's favor. On top of that, the slaves have managed to take down the vampire general, so it wouldn't be a stretch to say victory is almost within their grasp. But then, Nebula's eyes catch something unexpected. And that unexpected thing is Jielwubi, who has a whisper request. What Nebula finds odd is that this guy chose to whisper him of all people, and at this exact time. This player's very existence is suspicious. Their nickname, appearance, timing, and even their species, one that didn't exist until now, are all weird. Normally Nebula wouldn't have accepted such a thing, but well, my guy ends up accepting anyway. As soon as the accept button is pressed, we see this dude who looks like a beat-up piñata, apparently wearing a human mask. Even his unusual appearance leaves our boy bewildered, but he eventually asks the man for an introduction. Since everyone's been calling him Jielwubi, he asks if that name is okay. But this creepy sucker doesn't respond. So, my guy asks why he's not speaking, since he's the one who sent the whisper. That's when this bastard finally opens his filthy mouth and asks Nebula if he really thinks he can win. My guy responds confidently with a yes, and that prompts this creepy sucker to claim he's going to win. But Nebula makes it clear that he is not letting any creepy sucker take the victory, and even claims that he would have won, even if it wasn't a battle for the hill castle. The creepy sucker then says he wasn't talking about the dull, lowly ones with 2 feet. But Nebula clarifies that if he's talking about a battle between Rakrak and Shaven, he's even less concerned, because if this filthy mug descends, so can he. However, Jill Wooby's reply remains the same. He's not talking about that either, and states that Nebula can't change anything in this world. Nebula has no clue what this clown is talking about. He is sure that if this person is a human who came from Earth, he would have said he's going to win the game. But Nebula can't make sense of what this filthy mug meant when he said, "You can't change anything." So, he decides to provoke him to get some answers. Nebula boldly claims again that he's going to win, develop his civilization, connect all the continents, and set up shrines in every city. But this beat-up piñata once again tells him to just stop, once again critically speaking, and stating that this kind of power isn't his, because it originally belonged to them. Nebula is intrigued by the mention of them, and wonders if there are others like this masked guy. Curiosity gets the better of him, and he asks about his identity, but the masked guy doesn't bother to answer. Instead, he confidently says he's here to take back the old debt. With that, the whisper call ends, leaving Nebula with a ton of unanswered questions. He doesn't dwell on it too much, though, since it's time to intervene in the battlefield. But right at that moment, something unexpected catches Nebula's attention. Some sort of red energy. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Rockrak has severed Shivan's hand, but her anger is still clearly etched on her face. Rockrak, on the other hand, takes his stance in order to end this finally. His familiar charges at her with godlike speed, while Rockrak aims his spear directly at her. But just as he's about to blow her head off, his familiar suddenly slams the brakes out of nowhere. The red light Nebula saw earlier descends right in front of them, leaving Rockrak in complete awe. That red light wasn't some flashy stunt. It was a gigantic sword crashing down like a goddamn meteor. The one holding this colossal sword looks creepily similar to the masked guy, Jill Wooby, but way bigger. So massive that Rockrak has to crane his neck just to look up at this bastard's face. This giant man has 4 arms and a body so enormous that Rockrak, for a moment, wonders if he's looking at a god. Not only does this guy wield a giant sword, but he's also carrying a bow, a hammer, and a spear in his other hands. It seems like Nebula knows exactly what's going on. He had hoped that Jill Wooby wouldn't know how to use that skill, but it looks like he was wrong. You see, this guy is using a skill called manifestation, which is something you get at Divinity level 16. Unlike Descent, this skill allows the gods themselves to land on Earth. The god can then set up the appearance of their manifestation, which is based on the domain they control. Even Nebula is in awe of its sheer size. This guy is so massive that even Stratus, that giant mantis, would barely make a dent on this behemoth. Rockrak seems panicked as well and orders a retreat, especially since manifestation consumes way more faith than Descent. To maintain the manifestation at Jill Wooby's current level, he'll need sacrifices. And since he can't perform a large-scale ceremony right now, he has no choice but to take sacrifices right there on the spot. That means he's going to have to kill his own people. And right away, the bastard grabs a handful of people and tosses them straight into his mouth. Shivan looks absolutely amazed to see the sight in front of her. She feels proud of her decision to make this her god. He doesn't care about friend or foe. He's just gorging on blood and flesh. All this madness makes her laugh out loud because, in her mind, this god isn't much different from her. Meanwhile, after taking in the situation, Nebula is sure he'll lose some Lizardmen. But if they escape through a side road where the siege is weaker, the damage won't be too great. Once this monster recovers his faith, the hill castle will be empty already, and Shaven's remaining forces will retake the castle. But it'll leave a huge mark on the vampire army and drain Jill Wooby's resources. They won't be able to use the hill castle, and only a few soldiers will remain, and they will have to travel across the continent to recover their forces. Once their power weakens, Nebula plans to deal with them personally. There will be quite a bit of damage done to the other players, but that's not his responsibility. Meanwhile, Rockrak is making sure everyone leaves the castle as fast as possible, because no one knows when the evil god will attack. Commander Quezzle requests that Rockrak go downhill with their people, and he'll personally take care of the castle. But Rockrak is not willing to abandon his warriors just to escape. Quezzle reminds him that he's not just a leader, but a king as well. But Rockrak sticks to his guns, and makes it clear that being a king doesn't grant him the right to act like a coward. Quezzle tries to remind him of the responsibilities of being a king. He's the one most revered, their role model, and he should be the one leading them. They keep arguing until an explosion catches both of their attention. Quezzle then reminds Rockrak that his death would bring huge disorder to their nation, but their heirs are still young, so he better make sure to stay safe. But for Rockrak, if abandoning his people is what it takes to be called a king, then he's not fit for the position. He looks at the monstrosity before him and can tell that it hasn't even filled half of its stomach yet. Not even half of the hill castle has been evacuated. Rockrak knows that the power of the gods does not last long, so if they leave them be, the Vampire King will stay alive, and after conquering the hill castle, he'll escape onto the continent. The battle will last several years, but not much longer than that, and the victory will be theirs win in the end. But Rakrak doesn't want a victory that costs countless sacrifices. With that in mind, Rakrak refuses to take any advice from Quazel. Instead, he throws his comrade out of the way and charges straight at the monster. Even Nebula is shocked out of his mind after watching Rakrak make such an idiotic and reckless move. To stop him, Nebula decides to descend, but just as he activates the skill, he's hit with a notification that Rakrak is resisting the descent skill. Nebula has the option to force a descent, but surprisingly, he refuses to do it. If he forces the descent, Rakrak will freeze for a brief moment, and that moment is all it would take for the monster to kill him. Meanwhile, Rakrak finally comes face to face with the monstrosity. The giant quickly swings at him, but Rakrak dodges the blow effortlessly. Nebula, on the other hand, is growing impatient. He's wishing Rakrak would just retreat already. He even sends red butterflies as a clear warning to not engage in this fight. But Rakrak ignores the message entirely, which just annoys Nebula out of his mind. The arrow Rakrak shoots at the behemoth barely scratches it, like a tiny needle prick, and it falls off harmlessly. The monster retaliates immediately, descending its massive sword straight toward Rakrak. But Rakrak leaps into the air just in time and strikes the beast with his blue lightning. Unfortunately, that blue lightning is nothing more than a tiny tickle to this colossal monster. Since Nebula cannot descend right now, he opts for another option, which is to sponsor faith resources for the battle. Once he does, Rakrak manages to strike the giant monster with an equally massive bolt of light that cracks the hell out of the beast. All the while, Rakrak continues to resist the descent skill, and it's driving Nebula insane. Nebula knows some of the black-scaled tribe warriors would disobey their chief's orders if it meant saving him, which proves without a doubt that Rakrak is a true warrior. But Nebula isn't sure if Rakrak should be going against the god's will. He can see the flawed logic Rakrak is following, trying to save more lives by putting his own on the line. Rakrak seems to think that fighting this monster will reduce its manifestation time. To him, saving lives matters more than a shallow victory, so he's giving it everything he's got. As soon as Rakrak gets close enough to the monster's head, he calls out to Stingray for help. The blue lightning spirit complies, charging Rakrak's spear with electric power. Rakrak throws the spear with all his strength at the monster's head. In the aftermath, all that's visible is smoke. But within that smoke, the monster's red eyes begin to glow, which is a clear sign that shit is about to go down. The giant swings its enormous hammer, and with one devastating blow, Rakrak is knocked out for good. For Nebula, it's a crushing sight. The system honors Rakrak with a tribute. Rakrak, the warrior, the hand hunter, the lizardman of thunder, the first chosen one, the chief of the black-scaled tribe, the founding king of Hukrin, the great thunder dragon king, the model for all lizardmen, the one who opened the path, and a king greater than anyone else. Rakrak the high priest has died. This loss causes Nebula to lose experience points, but the emotional blow is far heavier, not for Nebula, but for all of the Rakrak fans. Rakrak's lifeless body brutally slams into the ground, and that giant piece of shit swings his axe, making sure to crush what's left of Rakrak, ensuring there's nothing left of him. Nebula could only watch in shock. To him, this was the biggest strategic loss he could have faced. Sure, it's somewhat inconvenient to lose your most prized asset in such a critical moment, but Nebula had expected this much to happen. He will now appoint Hui Kyung for the Rakrak's role. And as for Rakrak, Nebula plans to send him to the afterlife, but before he could share his next plan, he gets a notification. It reminds him that Rakrak, a figure respected by all, has passed away, and many are mourning his death. Of course, Nebula finds it incredibly annoying to see this. It's as if the system is mocking him by pointing out the obvious. But then something catches his eye. The notification reads that Rakrak has been declared an apostle and has attained a divine status. This completely throws Nebula off guard, as he never expected something like this to happen. It feels almost unreal. You see, apostles are those who assist gods, and when a god's creation grows, or when a special being like a dragon becomes part of the faith, they can be made apostles. Sometimes even ordinary beings can rise to this status, which is known as ascension. Apostles can instantly obtain divinity levels and spread faith by taking the lead, rather than just following a god's orders. What's bothering Nebula, though, is that neither of the conditions for Rakrak's ascension seem to be met. Here are the conditions for apostle ascension. The entity's level must be at least hero rank, meaning level 21 or higher. The entity's story must be known by the majority. The entity must have internalized faith in the god. Lastly, Nebula must have 1 million in faith value. Although the first condition is met, the others are unclear. Nebula isn't sure what it truly means for an entity to be known by the majority, or what internalized faith in God means. Above all, the last condition does not meet the criteria at all. With his divinity level at 11 and a faith value of just 100,000, this doesn't seem to fit the apostle criteria. For Nebula to have a faith value of 1 million, his own divinity level would need to be at least 21, but his current divinity level is still at 11, making that impossible. Then, another notification takes him by surprise, telling him that he has surpassed the possible number of faiths, and the faith count is now skyrocketing. Nebula is left speechless to see this. While his faith is dropping down, it's also filling up at an incredible speed. He has no idea where all this faith is coming from. At that moment, the scene shifts to this massive behemoth, tearing through everything in its path. Watching the destruction, all the slaves begin praying for Rakrak. It's not just the slaves and lizardmen. Even the vampires are praying for him. But still, Nebula thinks, there just aren't enough people praying for Rakrak to generate this much faith value. It goes against the rules of the game. However, it seems Nebula might be wrong about all of this. He's absolutely shocked when he begins to consider the possibility that this world might not actually be a game after all. You see, the perished world was a game, but this world doesn't seem to follow the same rules. The system simply makes it appear like a game. If he is guessing it right, this means that the feelings, beliefs, and convictions of the people aren't something that can be easily quantified by the system. What Nebula is witnessing is something beyond the system's limits. It's a miracle, something that surpasses the numbers and constraints of the game. The collective beliefs and convictions of the people are so strong, they've triggered something extraordinary. The system then prompts Nebula, stating that Rakrak is requesting Advent. Nebula is quite fascinated to see this. Despite Rakrak just dying, he wants to fight as an apostle. At first, Nebula hesitates. He doesn't have the stats to support Rakrak in the battlefield. But then he remembers something important. Rakrak's fame and the titles he earned while alive will be reflected in Rakrak's abilities once he becomes a being of the story. With that in mind, Nebula presses yes and wishes Rakrak the best in his new journey. Meanwhile, on the ground, Commander Quazel is helping the other Lizardmen evacuate. Everyone feels numb after witnessing the death of their king. Though Commander Quazel would love nothing more than to drown in sorrow, there's no time for that. He knows he has to make the most of Rakrak's sacrifice. Thanks to their king, everyone can safely escape. But Quazel isn't sure how Zale will react when he learns their king is dead. Up until now, many within the continent have fought for their own greed, trying to claim precious things for themselves. But Quazel feels like Lord Rakrak's actions will change something. He's certain that Rakrak's death will have a profound effect, though he's unsure if they can ever completely defeat that evil god. Just as Quazel contemplates this, something incredible happens. Everyone suddenly hears a crackling thunder, and a bolt of lightning descends from the sky like a meteor. The sheer brilliance of the light causes everyone to freeze. The light is so blinding that even the massive monster is temporarily blinded. In a panic, the creature swings its colossal hammer toward the source of the light. But as soon as the hammer gets close, the monster's weapon is tossed aside like it was nothing more than a stuffed toy. Then, the monster senses a familiar presence, and it quickly starts losing its mind. This isn't just any ordinary being, it's Rakrak, who's just ascended. And you can tell that he's no longer the same. He looks like an absolute powerhouse, an absolute beast of a lizard, and it's clear he's now on a whole new level. All the lizardmen burst into joyous celebration upon seeing their king on the battlefield. Meanwhile, the vampires look absolutely boggled that Rakrak is still alive, or rather, returned in a new divine form. The colossal monster, however, is furious. The thought of a mere mortal challenging him is beyond insulting. Out of frustration, he hefts his massive hammer and prepares to bring it crashing down once more. But Rakrak isn't here to take any of that. He takes his stance and starts channeling his thunder power. Just as the hammer begins to descend, Rakrak launches himself like a bolt of lightning and strikes the monster directly on its right shoulder, leaving it groaning in pain and momentarily staggered. As Rakrak readies himself for another attack, we get a glimpse of his newly revised stats displayed on screen. He's now a level 6 warrior and a king, but his ascension as an apostle has brought him to an impressive level 13. Alongside these, there's an array of other stats, showcasing his incredible transformation. One thing is clear though, being an apostle is no joke. Rakrak isn't just back, he's stronger than ever, and he's here to turn the tide. Nebula also observes Rakrak's new stat upgrades with fascination. He notices that the levels Rakrak had as a high priest have been seamlessly transferred to his new role as an apostle. Since apostles possess divinity, these levels now include something called the D state, which represents divinity. However, Nebula knows that this alone isn't enough to take on the level 16 manifestation of Jielwubi. That giant manifestation boasts a 16D divinity level, 3 ranks higher than Rakrak's. But Nebula realizes something important. The true power of an apostle doesn't lie in raw levels alone. It's all about their skills, fame, and titles, which are reflected in the form of unique abilities. Rakrak's first display of power, blocking the hammer, was thanks to a skill called Hand Hunter. This skill made it possible for him to deflect the weapon despite the overwhelming difference in raw power. Since Rockrak is no longer a one-trick pony, we are about to witness another skill, known as weapon creation. Rockrak activates weapon creation and conjures a giant bow, challenging the monstrous manifestation, which is now also wielding a bow to take down the flying hero. The monster unleashes a massive arrow, but Rockrak is ready. He channels all his electricity into his own arrow, charging it with the power of thunder. This ability, known as Lizardmen of Thunder, is one of Rockrak's most potent skills. It consumes faith to fuel thunder-based attacks, turning Rockrak into a storm-bringing force of destruction. Once that giant thunder strike is unleashed, it devours the incoming arrow and heads straight for the giant bastard, who gets the biggest shock of his life. But still, as massive as that thunder attack might be, this behemoth isn't ready to give up. The thought of losing to this apostle, who has just obtained divinity, doesn't sit well with him. So, the big guy throws his massive weapon at our lizard hero once again, but Rockrak quickly surfs over the spear. And after soaring higher into the sky, he prepares his own divine spear, ready to throw it down. The people of the Lizardmen tribe cheer, offering all their support and best wishes. Because of their positive attitude toward their king, the system announces a 4-point divinity increase in camaraderie, and another 4-point increase due to the relationship with the citizens of Hukrin. There's also an additional 4-point divinity boost in camaraderie due to the slaves Rockrak has helped, who now know his name and follow him. Currently, Rockrak is earning an apostle's faith based on his camaraderie and charisma. And once you add this another skill, the first chosen one, it increases his stats proportionally to the faith resources he has just obtained. To put it simply, the more people pray for Rockrak, the stronger he gets. With all the power Rockrak has managed to gather, he comes crashing down toward the monster, channeling all his electric energy. Quizzle feels absolutely proud and confident seeing his king back in action. He tells his king to exterminate the evil once and for all. From the people's perspective, they see a star so bright heading directly toward the monster. The light emanating from it is so intense that everyone has to cover their eyes. But one of the slave boys watches everything with his eyes wide open and sees how the giant monster's equally giant head is obliterated by the light. The light is almost like a beacon of hope, taking down the monster and leaving everyone in absolute awe. All of the Lizardmen and slaves are having the time of their lives, seeing the monster finally put to an end. Quezzle runs towards his king, promptly falls to his knees, lowers his head, and waits for his king to respond. Rockrak states that he has to leave now, but Quezzle isn't sure what the hell he's talking about. Rockrak then points out that he definitely had died, and this is the way of the heavens. But Quezzle argues, asking at least to return to the palace and say his final goodbyes to his loved ones. Rockrak humbly reminds him that the heavens are not something they should go against. Quizzle, of course, is in tears, devastated by the thought that his most beloved leader is going to leave him behind. But that's when Rockrak offers him the spear he holds and tells him to take the weapon that killed the evil god in Hukrin. It's a divine object, so he better handle it carefully. Quizzle extends both of his hands with the utmost respect, while Rockrak flashes a pleasant smile at him. He tells him to not feel sad about anything, as he is going to protect Hukrin as an apostle of God. Quizzle promises to his king that he will ensure Rockrak's name is never forgotten from this land. But Rockrak surprisingly tells him that this isn't what he should focus on. Quizzle has no idea what his king means, but Rockrak is pretty sure that he will figure it out himself, and with that, he leaves the rest in Quizzle's capable hands. The commander cries, promising to carry out his duties to the best of his abilities. And just like that, his king disappears before him. After the defeat of the evil god, some of the vampires surrendered, while others scattered into smaller troops. High Priest Shaven, having lost her god, was killed by her subordinates and offered to Hukrin. Time passed, and 137 years went by just like that. In Hukrin's capital, Orizon, it was King Anpyong's 23rd year of governance. In one of the libraries of the palace, this old lady can be seen visibly displeased with the idea that they are skipping over the first prince and instead planning to accept the third prince as the crown prince. Her sharp tone makes it clear she strongly opposes the suggestion. Across from her, there is this white-scaled lizard who is seemingly unmoved by her objections. The white lizardman once again suggests skipping over the first prince and crowning the third prince instead. But once again, the old lady voices her opposition. After all, it's been a long-standing tradition that the first prince always inherits the imperial succession. This tradition has been around for more than 100 years now, so suddenly breaking it doesn't seem appropriate. Also, we don't have to keep calling him the White Lizardman anymore. His name is Dunan, and he holds the sacred position of hunting minister in the right cabinet. Moving on, Dunan reminds her that there have been exceptions in Hukrin's history, so he's not sure why she's against the idea this time. Sure, she acknowledges that the first prince is a lazy type who isn't exactly studious, more of a fun-seeking, laid-back guy. But that's not a good enough reason to make him give up his position as crown prince. This woman, by the way, is the leader of the left cabinet. Her name is Hui Moon. While she doesn't think the first prince's unserious behavior is anything to worry about, Dunan has the exact opposite opinion. Just look at the rumors that reveal how the first prince was out shooting with street thugs from Orizon right after learning how to hunt. If the kingdom's heirs are going to be that detached from their responsibilities, always partying and slacking off, then no minister would want to serve under such a ruler. But Hui Moon believes the first prince has been sick for a long time, and she doesn't want to put any pressure on him that might worsen his condition. She even suggests that Dunan be a little more sensitive with his words. The white lizard sincerely acknowledges the lack of empathy in how he's putting things. But that doesn't mean he wants to see the first prince on the throne. He suggests Hui Moon subtly hint his opinion to His Majesty ahead of time. He doesn't exactly want to shock the king the day he bluntly announces he's ousting the first prince. Of course, that makes the woman lose her bananas a bit, seeing how cold-blooded this reptile is. Did you see what I did there? Meanwhile, the lizard pushes her to propose the third prince as crown prince and to convince anyone who tries to make a fuss. Hui Moon is clearly not satisfied with how he's trying to handle this delicate issue, so she chases after him, insisting he reconsider. But it seems like her opinion means very little to him. He just straight up ignores her. All she can do is grumble behind Dunan, cursing the stubbornness this guy always shows. To understand what all this crown prince drama is about, here's the context. As we already know, it's been 100 years since Hukran's great king, Rakrak, passed away. The royal family has continued through Rakrak's descendants. It goes without saying that every king since has been accomplished in their own ways, but none of them have come even close to matching the greatness Rakrak represented. And while there have been subpar kings, the current ruler, King Anpyong, is generally seen as someone who brought peace to the nation, even if he hasn't achieved much over the past 10 years. Now tension is rising within the royal family about who's going to succeed him. The scene now shifts to this old lizard hag who's supposedly the prince's teacher. Her name is Ravine Quez. In front of her sits third prince Kyle Lark Orizon, currently 12 years old. Since Kyle has basically finished reading every book in the library, across every field and subject, his teacher wants to know which branch of study he'd like to pursue. But Kyle is having a hard time picking just one field. He found a lot of them fascinating, so he asks if it's possible to choose more than one. Ravine suggests he briefly explain the books that fascinated him most, and what he liked about them. First up, he mentions Owen's travel diary. He claims to love it because of how it describes countless places and species he's never seen before. It's basically a travel diary written by Owen, a lizard man who lived during Rakrak's generation. Owen was a traveler who went to all sorts of places, leaving behind 9 travel journals before heading west later in life. Since there are no records after the 9th book, the 10th one is known as the Book of Illusions. Ravine is pleased to hear about Kyle's first pick, as it just shows that he's like many kids who love adventure stories. But then she's surprised when he mentions the next books on his list: Zael's Algebraic Theory and Orizon's Architectural Design. Zael's books, he says, make logic feel joyful, and you can really feel the warmth she had for people through her writing. Zael was a mathematician and architect of her time. She compiled the math of her era, making her a one-of-a-kind figure in history. She also supervised the construction of the 4 water wheels and designed the capital city of Orizon. Every achievement and invention she made is clearly recorded in the books. Given that Orizon's architectural design is packed with complex numbers and floor plans, it's kind of insane that a kid like Kyle can sense the feelings of the architect just by reading it. To be clear, Zael's books make most scholars look clueless, since they can barely understand them. Kyle also brings up a book known as Quezel's Ethics, written by his teacher's ancestor. Hearing that, Ravine feels proud that her family stood by Rakrak's side and supported him however they could. The Ethics of Quezel often quotes Rakrak's way of life, along with some original ideas added in by Quezel himself. By now, Ravine Quez is completely blown away by her student's intellect. It's admirable that such a young child even regards morality as an important topic, a crucial virtue for any king to have. As if that wasn't enough, Kyle further expresses his interest in Yur's Battle in the Plains, Saren Mule's Night Sky, and Rakrak's How to Read the Sky book. He goes on to reveal fascinating tidbits and what he likes about these books. The lizard lady is fascinated beyond words. She can't even put into words how shocked she is. To have read so much and understood it all at such a tender age shows just how extraordinary this kid truly is. What disappoints her, though, is that Kyle is only the 3rd prince of the kingdom, making his chances of running the kingdom slim at best. The crazy part is that she even acknowledges that this kid is more knowledgeable than her in many areas. While she hopes he will use his knowledge to do good for society, she also fears he will be overshadowed because of his position as 3rd prince. Kyle snaps her out of it by calling her out. He actually wants to ask something that's been on his mind for a long time, though it's not related to studying, or maybe it is. He isn't sure. Regardless, He's got a question he wants answered. He's just not confident about asking. Ravine gives him the green light to ask whatever his heart desires. Finally, he questions her. Can he qualify to become king? This catches the teacher completely off guard. She literally chokes on her tea as the gravity of the question sinks in. She instantly asks if he's brought this question up with anyone else. He replies no, much to her relief. She advises him not to say this in front of anyone else. Kyle understands the consequences of his words and knows he must be careful around others. She's the only person he's brought this up with and wants an honest answer, if he can actually qualify to be the next king. The woman hesitates to answer. See, the first prince, Basan Lak Orazon, has already been elected crown prince. The only way Kyle could become king is if Basan is ousted. Anyone who objects to the first prince is automatically deemed a traitor. In the worst case, that could cost you your life. So she's unsure if she can even answer this daunting question Kyle has posed. Instead, she throws a question back at him. Does he want to become king? Kyle isn't sure about that either. But one thing he is certain of is that if he were to become king, he could be a great asset to the kingdom. And that claim totally catches Ravine off guard. Let's take a quick bonus scene of serene mountains before we transition to Runda throwing a fit. She literally knocks over the chessboard Nebula and Eldar were using to play. When Runda notices Eldar with Nebula, she gets even angrier for some reason. What pushes her over the edge is the fact that Nebula never shares any crucial info with her, even though she always shares everything she knows. Nebula finally decides to share some juicy intel, but only after she wins. To find out what Nebula is holding back, the lady decides to play the board game, only to lose multiple rounds. By now, she feels like he's just toying with her, intentionally not giving up any information. After throwing yet another fit, she hangs up on him like she'll never contact him again. Meanwhile, Eldar is also curious about the information Nebula is holding. Since he isn't acting as a double agent for anyone, unlike Runda, he assures his fellow that the information won't be leaked. Nebula seems to trust him and decides to reveal an interesting tidbit. He points at the third prince of Hukrin on the screen. What makes this kid special are his unusual stats. While he may not have flashy or exciting skills up his sleeve, his intelligence stands at a whopping 107, making him super intelligent. Unsurprisingly, Eldar is startled to see Kyle at level 0 yet boasting the highest intelligence stat, which is extremely rare. Having an intelligence stat of 60 gets you called a genius in this generation, but surpassing 100? That's crazy. Nebula is confident it'll be difficult to find anyone with this level of intelligence for decades across the continent. Here's a little background on what's been going on over the past 100 years. After the battle between Hukrin and Beka ended, everything stagnated for the next century. No major events worth noting. Besides discovering ancient relics, killing abominations and abominable gods, and gaining small domains, the borders barely changed. With expanding borders, managing internal affairs also became a must, something Nebula should be taking care of. This is why he feels stagnation after a few decades is necessary in the game. Outside of the main species who led the early expansion, this was a period where appeasement policies were necessary to win over other species within the nation. Hukrin had its share of small and big issues due to the mixing of several species. While these problems aren't recorded in history, there were 6 revolts. The hardest issue was coexistence with vampires. See, after the evil god's defeat at Nebula's end, Beka's slaves and vampires wanted to be naturalized as Hukrin citizens. Of course, symbiosis with vampires was difficult, especially since vampires survive by drinking blood. The second and third generation high-rank vampires couldn't survive on animal blood alone, so the vampires made a surprising choice. They took refuge in mountain caves and prayed to Nebula, expressing their desire to follow the will of the blue insect god. As witnesses to Apostle Rakrak's holy death, they no longer wanted to live by hurting others. About 1,000 vampires decided to starve themselves to death. Though some escaped or couldn't resist temptation, 600 vampires endured the pain and faced death without moving an inch. They may have sinned, but since they reflected on their sins and wanted to be punished, even the Lizardmen believed the blue insect god would forgive them immediately. And so, they were forgiven. The area where the vampires repented later became known as Digging Buddha Valley, a sanctuary of the Night Sky Order. This place became a symbol of repentance and atonement, proving that even if you weren't a lizard man, with true faith, the blue insect god would embrace you. After this incident, the blue insect god was later bestowed with another title, Night Sky. That's how the Night Sky Order transformed into a faith followed by many species, not just lizardmen. Furthermore, this third prince who has Nebula's attention is also going to contribute further to these changes. For a civilization to develop, one needs suitable techniques and inventions, and those inventions must connect with each other. With the level of intelligence Kyle possesses, he's well suited to discover new things. If he becomes the next king, he would have the influence to bring important inventions all across Hukrin. The current governance structure of Hukrin isn't ideal. The left cabinet is open to several species and handles the internal affairs of the palace, doing the kind of work eunuchs did on Earth. However, the administrative officers with real power, the right cabinet, are monopolized by the Lizardmen. And everyone knows that power corrupts people, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So there gotta be some regime change. Kyle seriously needs to solve this issue of harmony between species, and the new king must be wise enough to handle and resolve these tensions. However, Eldar points out that Kyle is merely the third prince. The first son, Basun, who is supposed to inherit the throne, spends most of his time playing. Still, that's not a valid reason to oust him. Once the crown prince position is set, it would be nearly impossible for Kyle to become king. Nebula has the option to simply send down an oracle and intervene directly in internal affairs. But since this is an important period for sovereign power, divine intervention would be unwise. So he'll have to use a more indirect method. Eldar wants to know exactly what methods Nebula has in mind. In response, Nebula leans in and whispers every juicy detail into her ear, without letting any one of us know a single thing. The plan is so strange that Eldar has a hard time believing it will actually work. Perhaps he's just too overconfident in the third prince's unnatural intellect. Still, Nebula is so certain about his plan that he's willing to place a bet on it. In the palace garden, two ladies sneak around anxiously in the presence of a massive sleeping beast. This creature is actually Orizon's guardian dragon, known as Manhwa. Manhwa is a drake once handled by the great Thunder Dragon King, the founder of the nation. Like the stories say, drakes don't die of old age. Manhwa's growth period continued for decades, and he grew to gargantuan size. The beast is currently about 25 meters long and estimated to be 150 years old. With that hulking size, it goes without saying that his food consumption is equally stupendous. With a big diet comes a big dump too, which the palace must discard every day, making this high-maintenance animal quite a burden. People are also afraid the giant creature might go wild and destroy everything inside the palace. Some have suggested relocating Manhwa to a less populated town. Others even suggested offering him as a sacrificial animal. But since Manhwa's existence represents the sovereignty that has continued since the Thunder Dragon King, they have no choice but to keep him, even if it's just a burden to resources. Luckily, Manhwa has been eating and sleeping peacefully. However, that's about to change. Suddenly, the beast noticed familiar celestial blue butterflies. This causes it to perk up in happiness. After all, these butterflies represent his long-dead friend Rakrak coming to meet him. When your favorite comes down all the way from the heavens, leaving behind comfort just to meet you, it means you're the luckiest person alive. Apparently, Manhwa has recently been experiencing vague emotions and longing bubbling inside him, but the beast doesn't know what they were, or what to do about them. He often sees these blue butterflies that always remind him of his second owner, Rakrak. As much as he wants to chase those blue butterflies, Manhwa knows he's prohibited from going beyond the boundary wall. In a similar incident before, when he tried to go past the wall, the guards pushed him back in. But still, this fellow desperately wants to cross that wall and hug his friend. Rakrak also feels very grateful for the generous effort his god bestowed on him by giving him a chance to catch a glimpse of his old friend. The Lizard King was calling for his good old friend to come here, and that loyal fellow gives up on his urges and crashes right through the walls just to meet him. Somewhere in the palace, Dunan and his fellows catch the sudden sound of the crash Manhwa caused. By the time the guards went to inspect the place of the commotion, they realized Manhwa had escaped to the ancestral mountains, and that definitely got Dunan to perk up. Though his reaction wasn't as shocked compared to his fellows. In fact, his fellows were annoyed because, as the hunting minister, Dunan was supposed to go out and make an effort to catch Manhwa before the morning meeting. Since this involves beasts, it goes without saying it's the hunting minister's responsibility to bring that beast back. But Dunan has his own reasons for not wanting to chase the beast. After all, the hunting minister's main job is to prepare hunts for the nobles' entertainment, so he doesn't have time to track down Manhwa. But well, when duty calls, you don't have many options, or do you? A while later, after a little court meeting, Dunan can be seen storming out of the castle, totally exasperated. Even more annoying, the royal court didn't allow him to have a hunting expedition team, but were willing to lend him palace guards in this mission to capture Manhwa. The thing is, Manhwa could easily crush a bunch of royal guards to death with just a single body roll, so the only choice Dunan is banking on is to lure the beast with some food and trap him somehow. Even then, a lot of people will suffer. After all, civilian hunters usually travel those ancestral mountains too. If they get hurt by Manhwa, it's obvious public sentiment will turn against him. It's not every day a white guy like him gets chosen for a cabinet seat. But if this incident results in casualties, all the blame will fall on his shoulders. Damn, even these creepy crawling cold-blooded reptiles have racism among them. But thankfully, it's the white people here who have to fight it. Bro's sure his position as hunting minister is as good as gone. Back to the main task. The first thing he can do is gather clues about what triggered Manon to suddenly go rampant, even though he's been well behaved lately. For a moment, he thinks someone must be behind this, and this weak-ass boundary wall they built was part of the conspiracy. Suddenly, a few cockatrices zip past him, and one of the birds is occupied by the Prince Basan, Hukran's crown prince, Basan Lak Orazon. Finally, here's a formal introduction of the notorious first crown prince, known for his mischief and carefree lifestyle. Dunnan is rather surprised to see the first prince barging down unceremoniously toward the mountains and asks where he's going. Well, as expected, he's making his way to find Manon. Being the first prince, he doesn't feel the need to ask the hunting minister for permission. Under normal circumstances, of course, Basan wouldn't require anyone's permission. But it has already been decided that the hunting minister will be in charge of Manun's escape case, and this was settled a while ago in the imperial meeting. Seems like Prince Basan is indifferent to the imperial meeting's judgment. Since he believes this is for the better, no one can stop him. It's not an everyday occurrence when this creature goes out for a walk, so he wanted to see Manun on the move and came with his friends. But now he feels greedy as he desires to capture the creature himself. Of course, this causes an exaggerated concern from Dunan. After all, the first prince's drunken bozo friends are no good. In fact, they're still drunk down to their very last brain cell, so Dunan pretty much guesses these dudes won't listen to him under any circumstance. While the first prince may be good at hunting, he won't stand a chance against Manon, given the beast's size, which I guess is a good thing. The cockatoo the first prince is riding won't be able to keep pace with Manon, and the beast will escape before Basan can reach him. So the hunting minister suggests Basan inform the closest forest ranger as soon as he spots Manon in the wild. But the first prince makes it clear the beast is his to capture, so no reporting back. Then again, he does understand the hunting minister's obligations and reluctantly agrees to report any sightings of the creature. With that, he's off on his hunt along with his drunken buddies. The wise white lizardmen can do nothing but fume in exasperation, but that fuming anger soon fades when he spots Prince Kyle in the distance, examining the breakout. They lock eyes at that moment before Kyle explains why he's here. He's actually here to find clues behind Manon's disappearance. He also noticed Basan is already on the prowl. He acknowledges that the first prince is good at hunting, but capturing a beast as massive as Manun requires more than just hunting skills. Regardless, Dunan is more interested in what bits Kyle has managed to gather regarding the case. The first thing Kyle notices is how strange the wooden bar is. Anyone can tell from its appearance that it's difficult to break cleanly. If force had been applied, it would have shattered into pieces. Given this, it likely means insects have eaten away at it, though it doesn't make sense. After all, these wooden boards are attached to stone columns. The insects likely crawled through the stone columns and reached the wooden part. But how come the insects only ate the specific part in the middle? If the insects had eaten all the wooden parts equally, the entire structure would have collapsed when Manon tried to escape. But only the middle part was weakened by the insects, convenient enough for Manhwa to break through and make a run for it. It's like a coincidental natural occurrence. Even if they coat the specific parts of the wooden fence with honey, it would take several days for the insects to eat through it. This is when the first prince connects the dots and points out the old name of the night sky god, which was used 100 years ago. It was called the blue insect god. If you go further back into history, there are records that the night sky god was even called the nameless beetle god. When the Hukran tribe was starving and wandering the wild, the insects guided them and kept them fed. Basically, what Kyle is implying is that the blue insect god, aka the night sky, caused this to happen, though Dunan finds it unconvincing. Kyle also admits it's just a hypothesis he came up with. He's ready to confirm it by checking if the other wooden bars have been eaten by insects too. Even if the night sky is behind this, Dunan seriously wants to know the motivation. But right now, he's more worried about the consequences than who caused it. While there are hunters and rangers on the ancestral mountains, Manon is big enough to be seen from afar, so it will be easier for people to avoid direct confrontation with Manun, making it difficult for them or civilians to become casualties. However, some might get that hard boner to chase down this mighty beast and capture it. Now that Dunan mentions it, Kyle points out that the person who chases down the beast might be the ultimate target for the night sky god. And speaking of which, that person just so happens to be Prince Basan. Looks like Dunan finally cracked the code exactly what Kyle is intending to imply. Maybe the night sky really exists, and it wants the nation to succeed. For that to happen, it wants the third prince to become the next king. If that's the case, then the night sky god might try to claim Prince Basan's life. This shit is serious, so much so that Dunan doesn't want Kyle telling anyone. While the young one promises to keep it secret, he has a favor to ask. Since Dunan is planning to go after Basan, Kyle wants to tag along too. This request catches the white lizard off guard. He can sense Kyle isn't just being stubborn about going, there's a purpose behind it. See, having Kyle around will likely increase Basan's chances of survival, After all, the night sky god only wants Basan's life, and if Kyle gets hurt, that won't do anyone any good. Cut to Basan and his drunkard bozo friends following Manon's trail. After a short journey, they spot the beast nearby, lying on the ground. It's pretty unusual they found the beast so easily. Conveniently enough, Manun even left a trail behind, making tracking easier. Since Basan isn't that sharp, he assumes the beast must have been suffocating and itching to roam after being stuck in a shitty garden for over 100 years. Basan even feels a little sympathy for the poor creature that spent all that time sleeping. While the beast sleeps soundly, Basan's drunk buddies suggest waking the dragon up and driving it back to the palace. But the terrifying grumbling noises the beast makes even while asleep scare the bozos into retracting their plan. They start throwing out random solutions to a problem they clearly don't understand. Eventually, they settle on luring the beast with some kind of deer as bait, something the beast can eat. Basan decides to put this plan into action, sending his buddies off to fetch bait while he stays behind to make sure Manun doesn't wake up and move. Seems like Basan used this ploy to shoo the idiots away. First, because their plan was ridiculous. Second, if they all stayed, Basan wouldn't get the credit for bringing Manun back. Speaking of credit, Basan takes us down memory lane where we learn a little about him, like how he used to be praised for everything he achieved. But he soon realized that wasn't enough. He once asked his teacher, Ravine, why, if the night sky god is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, there's still war, pain, sadness, and misfortune in the world. He was seriously curious and wanted answers, but Ravine didn't seem to have any. That day, she even tried racking her brain for a plausible explanation, but eventually she ended the lesson. That's when Basan realized the compliments he had been getting weren't true acknowledgement. True acknowledgement, he figured, only comes when you do something so outstanding it leaves everyone speechless, just like the night sky god. Basan has never felt that kind of acknowledgement in his life. He knows many don't think he's worthy to be king, but he can't help it. He was born this way. After all, he's not naturally gifted like his younger brother Kyle, so he hopes to earn respect and sway public opinion by producing results. This is one of his few chances to prove if he's worthy of being king. Suddenly, his brother Kyle arrives on the scene. As Kyle jumps off his bird, he trips and sprains his ankle. His concerned brother and hunting minister look shocked. The first prince quickly tends to Kyle while scolding the hunting minister for bringing such a young kid into a dangerous place. He then orders Dunan to fetch some medicine from a nearby hut on the mountain ridge. With that, the white lizard heads off to grab ointment. But it turns out they don't need any ointment at all, especially since Kyle's perfectly fine, much to his older brother's surprise. Apparently, Kyle didn't really sprain his ankle. It was just a ploy to send Dunan away so he could have a private chat with his brother. Basan still doesn't understand why Kyle had to risk his life coming so dangerously close to Manun just for a talk. But we all know this creature is an extremely dangerous entity, but not for Kyle. He eventually fills his big brother in on every juicy detail he's managed to gather. A while later, the third prince's downcast face reveals his heavy burden upon learning that the night sky god might be trying to claim his life. Though Kyle admits this is only his interpretation, not to mention, Dunan somehow agrees with the possibility. Even if it's true, Basan cannot understand why Kyle came all this way to save him. After all, Kyle could have simply stayed back and watched the crown prince die, making himself next in line to the throne. Their second brother has already become a priest of the Night Sky Order, so if Basan were to perish, Kyle would automatically inherit the crown prince position. Out of curiosity, Basan asks his younger brother if he really isn't interested in the crown. Well, we all know that Kyle has long desired the throne. This is exactly why he came. But rather than killing his own brother, he wants his big brother to hand over the crown prince title willingly. Basan is clueless and doesn't know how to react. Kyle, meanwhile, doubles down on his request, reminding him that history has proven the night sky god never fails. While other gods have failed to prove themselves, the night sky god always emerges victorious. This shows how meticulous the god is, paying attention to every subtle detail to ensure his plans succeed perfectly. So it goes without saying that Basan will eventually die unless he hands over his crown prince's title willingly. Kyle is further certain the night sky god will exploit similar opportunities in the future. Though he can't foresee every move the god has planned, he promises to keep Basan informed whenever he uncovers such signs. This will help protect the kingdom and everyone's safety. Hearing this, Basan warns that opposing a god's will means going against divine will itself. They must be cautious and fearful, not defiant. Kyle, however, claims he understands the god well and is not afraid. At the very least, he will ensure no harm comes to anyone. The current path the night sky god has laid out jeopardizes Basan's safety. To avoid disaster, Kyle wants to guide events down a different path, one that the god has willingly offered as an alternative, ensuring Basan's security. Finally steeling himself, Kyle boldly demands again that Basan give up the crown prince position, ensuring that they adhere to God's will without any losses. Kyle's straightforwardness and intense gaze caused the big brother to burst out laughing, as if hearing the joke of the century. Eventually he calms down and admits he feels strangely relieved. He acknowledges Kyle's words instead of dismissing them. He also reminds his brother that even if he willingly gives up his position, it doesn't guarantee the future will unfold smoothly as they hope. Kyle is ready to face whatever comes, so long as he gets the title. Basan then asks about Manon, how they will deal with the mighty beast. They're unsure how to explain Manon's escape to the ministers. Kyle, however, says he has already figured it all out, so there is nothing to worry about. Later, back at the palace, Kyle is seen making deals with the hunting minister, looking forward to working closely in the future. After shaking hands, he joins his elder brother, leaving Dunan standing there, deep in thought. Since Kyle says he'll be more involved going forward, this likely signals that he has finally acquired the throne. Nearby, we also meet Nebula and Eldar watching everything happen. Eldar isn't sure about how things are going. Sure, the third prince is smart, but it could get messy if he makes every move based on his own reading of divine messages. Even though his interpretation was basically right this time, it's uncertain whether it'll be the same next time. Plus, a king who's so independent is a bit unusual. As for Nebula, he's not worried at all. Back when he used to play this game in the real world, he'd always faced this kind of problem where NPCs just didn't seem to act. He was still a good player, of course, and always found a way around it. But now the people he's dealing with aren't just random NPCs anymore. They're real people with desires driving them toward a goal. They might even have different ideas, but as long as they help Nebula get what he wants, it's all doable. Eldar has a different opinion on this. He believes that this very awareness can make it harder to guess what the characters will do, and their unexpected actions might ruin the whole plan. But Nebula thinks this works in his favor too. Just take a look at Rakrak's sacrifice as an example. He went against Nebula's wishes and fought on his own, which actually turned out to be a perfect outcome. Similarly, this situation with Kyle also went smoothly, simply because he chose to make his own decision instead of following God's hints. Even if things go bad one day, Nebula will simply be extra careful, treading lightly. It's just good that he was able to save Basan, who can be a big help while the third prince still becomes the next king. The scene then shifts to the royal court, where it's clear the important people are present, discussing Manun's escape. Administration Minister Salusin is pretty frustrated that the Minister of Hunting hasn't caught Manon yet. He worries that it might hurt the public if the capture takes too long. Dunan assures his senior that Manun's location has already been found, and luckily the beast is currently asleep, so there's nothing to worry about. The senior takes the good news well and calms down. Still, he can't help but point out how worried His Majesty has been about this, so much so that he couldn't even attend the meeting. The senior further wants him to speed up the capture now that they know exactly where he is. Well, Dunan wanted to do the same, but several things stopped him. Earlier today, when he went to the garden to chase Manun, he noticed that the wooden bars had been eaten by insects a long time ago. While you could argue that the insects eating the wood is just a coincidence, and Manun can definitely break through wooden bars himself, the third prince pointed out something interesting. He believed that the night sky god caused the insects to bite the wood to let the beast escape. The fact that only a certain part of the wood was weakened by the insects only proves the night sky god's involvement more. In the afternoon, Dunan went back to Manon's home with a few high priests, and after checking the area, they also came to the same conclusion. The man in question comes himself, the Night Sky Order's priest, second prince, Sean Lack Orazon. He's here to personally confirm that this is indeed a miracle caused by the night sky. With the confirmation coming straight from the high priest, Dunan couldn't possibly go against his will and bring Manon back. Everyone started discussing the matter disquietly. Eventually, they had no choice but to accept the truth, since the priest himself confirmed it. With that settled, Dunan fears that they can't leave Manun outside like this. Nor can they just leave him and wait for him to cause a serious accident one day. This is exactly why he'd like them to expand the hunting expedition team. Everyone in the court is surprised by this unusual request. Even the senior can't hide his annoyance as he asks how many people are actually needed. First, Denon wants a cow and a wagon to make sure they can move enough food for Manon. Second, they need more money for repairs because of the rough mountain paths. There's also a chance Manun might go wild, so Dunan also wants the right to control civilians, manpower, and to move the palace guards in an emergency. Well, at this point, looking at the senior's face, I can tell the hunting minister is asking for too much at this point. But then again, if all these things aren't given, they'll have no choice but to go against the night sky's miracle and bring Manon back. Dunan is also happy to hand over this job to anyone who thinks they can handle their current tough situation better. That said, he also makes it very clear that he won't be held responsible for any damage Manun causes, even though he's the hunting minister. Later that night, we cut to Dunan standing alone in the palace corridor, lost in his thoughts. His mind is busy with the recent development about Kyle being the new chosen king. Kyle even suggested a detailed plan to Dunnan that could really bolster the hunting team's strength and power within the royal court. Dunnan actually wants to follow his plan to make himself strong in the royal court, making sure he has enough authority to push Kyle as the next king. This man doesn't care what it takes. In fact, he's even willing to face off against the other ministers if needed. And so, as time passed, Dunnan slowly garnered power for the hunting